that we communicate with people changes. And the way I sort of think about it is the way some of you coach with the junior athletes is very different to the way we coach some of our senior members, very different to the way we coach newer members, or potentially the way we coach much older members as well. And those subtle changes in the way that we, the language we use, and I guess the way we communicate with people depends on a lot of different factors as well. A lot of socio-cultural factors, so people's background, ethnicity, religion, gender, all of those different things matter in the way that we communicate with people, okay? So when we're doing that, we need to be mindful of the way of how we communicate and the ways we communicate as well. So I guess we'll take a bit of a dive into the ways we can provide feedback to our clients. So the first thing we'll go through is our quantitative versus qualitative. Okay, we'll start with qualitative because this is something that most of us are pretty familiar with. Qualitative is just looking, like we're looking at the quality of a movement and we're providing general feedback based on that. So if I say to someone, oh, your squat's above 90 degrees, okay, there's no number associated with it. We can just see that the hip is above the knee joint and we know that it's not at 90 degrees. Okay, so qualitative. Quantitative is when we add a numerical value to that. So when we add a numerical value to that, we obviously need something to do that with. Now, whether that's some sort of like body 3D mapping, or whether it's force decks or whatever it might be, we need to have a number associated with that. And so when we have quantitative feedback, it might be in a more specific setting. Like we can do it in here for sure. Like if you wanted to film someone and then draw the angles on and do all that sort of thing. But more so it's related to whether someone needs that. For instance, we know an Olympic weightlifter needs to get the hip below the knee before they come out of the movement, or it's a no rep, okay? So if we had an Olympic weightlifter with mobility issues and we're saying, hey, we need to get you below that, and then we can start to look at the numbers we start with and the numbers we finish with as well, okay? So on that, we've got descriptive versus prescriptive. Okay, now descriptive feedback is just purely stating something, okay? You didn't make that bench press, okay? That's pretty obvious, all right? But when we add prescriptive value to it, we identify the error and then we also enhance that. So we say, you didn't make the bench press because, for instance, the elbow flared or you lost tension in the bottom of the movement and collapsed. So the way to fix that would be to get the armpits down to the back pockets and to drive the bar away from the chest. Okay? So with prescriptive, we're describing the nature of the error or of what we're seeing, and we're offering a solution as to how to correct that error as well. And you can sort of see when I look at like prescriptive feedback with quantitative feedback, those two can go very hand in hand when you start to say, hey, you missed it by X amount of degrees or whatever it might be. You know, potentially Nick in basketball, free throws, things like that. You can really start to ID or Daiki in sport with, actually identifying why people are making those errors and a way to manage that and a way to correct that as well. So with our augmented feedback, augmented feedback comes from an outside source, okay? So that means generally us as a practitioner, okay? Versus intrinsic feedback. So intrinsic feedback would be feedback that's coming from us. So for instance, if I'm squatting and I go, my knee dropped in, right? And I know that I felt my knee dropped at the bottom of that movement. So that was me identifying that error myself. Okay, but when I have augmented feedback, that's one of you providing that information for me. And there's lots of different ways we can do that as well. We can use technology. Okay, so augmented feedback can come from force decks, it can come from a Flex or a GymAware or video. Now video has been shown to be a really fantastic mode of providing feedback to clients because they can actually see themselves, or we can mirror behavior. So for instance, if we want to use, hey, this is a really great example of a squat, and we show them an example of a squat. So interestingly though, there has been some sort of link in that when we show someone mirroring behavior, normally it's good to use someone of a similar population to themselves. So for instance, a 90-year-old grandmother squatting for the first time doesn't necessarily need to see an Olympic weightlifter doing a squat, because there's no correlation between that and themselves. Okay, so when we're looking at augmented feedback, often with us providing that, we look at concurrent versus terminal. Now, concurrent feedback is when we provide feedback during the exercise. Okay, terminal is following the end of the exercise. Okay, so concurrent feedback has been shown to have a really good increase in performance, but not necessarily lead to long-term learning. Okay, so when we do that, think about if someone catches a clean and they're folding as they come out of the clean, elbows up, right? Elbows up, and they drive the elbows up, they come out. So there's been some interesting research come out just recently showing that there's up to an 8% increase in performance by providing that extrinsic feedback continually. Okay, now we just need to bear in mind that it's good for performance, but not necessarily for long-term performance. Okay, so think about when you're using that one. Now, terminal feedback is at the end of the exercise. So I guess with that one, what's been shown is that there's not an exact time frame as to when we should provide terminal feedback. Okay, it's somewhere in the range of 10 seconds through to 24 hours. Okay, but we shouldn't provide in that first 10 seconds, probably for a number of reasons. If someone's just got off an assault bike, maximal effort, and we're like, hey bro, like, you know, you need to fix this up, they're not really going to take that on board. You need to have time for them to think about what they've just done, and then to talk about it. Now, often for us as well, we like to provide all of the answers because we're coaches, right? There's a better way to do it, okay, or a different way to do it, and that's through problem solving with the client. Okay, and the way we do that is through asking questions. So the thing I like to do now is if I'm watching someone squat, I just let them finish the set. Okay, I don't need to tell them that their feet are too narrow and they're not getting to depth because they don't have the space or whatever it is. I don't need to do that during the rep. As long as everything's safe, I just let them finish the set. And then when they finish, they rack the bar and I go, how did that feel? Right? And I let them provide. It actually felt a bit weird. Like I felt like I, didn't have mobility. Okay, how do you think you might fix that? So what we do there is we start to offer the client the opportunity to problem solve, but also to enhance long-term learning. We're coaching because we're the practitioner that's guiding their learning, right? But they're learning long-term because they're problem solving themselves. And that means that eventually when they move on from here or wherever they might go, if they're training in another state while they're traveling, they've got the answers to the problems that we see in front of us, okay? So I know sometimes it's really tempting to want to just jump on top of it as soon as we see a fault, but it might be better sometimes just to sit back a little bit and wait till the end, use questioning, allow problem solving, allow for long-term learning as well, okay? So yeah, look, and that was going to be my next point, is that there are different methods of coaching for beginners versus performance, okay? If we're looking at someone from a performance perspective, 100%, that's what we're going to do it. Unless, of course, we're providing concurrent feedback and we're like, elbows up, and we want them to make that rep. Afterwards, we're going to say, like, provide that information. But for beginners, we probably need to use a range of methods, okay? And sometimes that might mean cueing during the exercise and doing that questioning or providing